you so much, Manisha, for having me here. And it has been lovely to discover more about you as well. As I always say, I'm a small town girl who decided to tread the regular aspirations and dreams. So I come from a place called Dehradun, and I moved to Delhi to fulfill my dreams of making it big in a corporate world. And that's exactly what I did. So, first 12 and a half to 13 years is what I spent in corporate. I started off in advertising, moved to telecom, and at that time, telecom, I'm talking about the year 2007, 2010. That was a time that corporate telecom was peaking. And I spent a good 12 and a half years in corporate, learning the tricks of the trade, doing the mundane jobs, as I would say now, in the closed four AC compartment, so to say. But I think then something changed. I would owe that change equally to Vodafone, the place that I was working with. So I was given a project to work with persons with vision impairment when I was leading the telemarketing channel for the Delhi circle. It was more an imposition at that time, given the fact that I was leading the sales part. For a salesperson, it is extremely important to look at only the number and the target. I remember when this project was given to me, I was extremely petrified and I was absolutely in denial that I don't want to do it. How are persons with vision impairment going to do what I do? But as the case was, I was actually given and thrust upon this project, which was about hiring 20 women with vision impairment spread across Delhi, and that's how it started, with a huge amount of nervousness and absolute sense of no understanding of what it meant, because the only way that I understood people with vision impairment was that there is a blind man walking across the road using a stick, or someone in the train who's singing a song, or someone who's outside the temple begging, because those are the stereotypes that I grew up with, and I will not deny it. That's the only way that I understood, right? In my mind, I knew, oh my God, people are supposed to call up customers. We're supposed to make these many sales per day. How are they going to do? But nonetheless, I thought it was more like a PR activity. I said, let's just run with it. And you won't believe, Monisha, to my absolute surprise, it was a 6-month project. And not only did it give me a deeper understanding of what perhaps could be done in terms of the potential, but it gave me a thorough insight into what possibly are the kind of challenges they overcome every day. I started mapping these girls' journeys every day. They used to take a bus from their hostel to different locations where they were placed, because I had not done any mapping. Because for me, it was more like a tick mark activity I had to do. So I just deployed them in different parts of the city and left it to them to figure out. These girls would take a regular roadways bus, and they would travel that 1.5 to 2 hour journey, change buses to reach the destination, walk up to the place where the seating arrangement was made for them, wait for the braille sheets to come to them. They were taught how to use a computer, but because the channel partner through whom we were deploying them did not have the computer facility, they used to wait for the braille sheets to come. The braille sheets used to take time to get printed. Once the braille sheets would come, then they would figure out what numbers to dial, then they would dial those numbers and then call. By the end of the day, they would still end up making that sale, which was essential for them to succeed. So I think those 6 months not only opened my eyes towards what possibly could be done, how much potential they had, but equally as much in terms of the kind of hardships they had to go through, the kind of commitment they came with, and how much they knew how to stretch their boundaries. And I think that to me was beautiful. Not only did it open the world for me with respect to disability, but I think it just opened up a very different part of my personality, which I thought never existed, you know, and that was what it did to me. So that's how I see my journey today. And every time a person asks me what your journey has been like, I always recount this incident.
I think the world is made of able-bodied people. You see more of them conducting themselves, and and even through different kinds of media channels, that's the kind of exposure that you have. But it takes, I think, this little brush with reality, a real life experience with somebody living with some challenge, to make you a little sensitive. And that is why I think this whole discussion is about redefining ability, disability, right? Because what we think it is, it isn't. And that is the truth of life. So, Richa, having sprouted from this experience, what are you doing today?
So, well, this incident or this experience, this happened in the year 2010 with me. This stayed with me. I was a hardcore salesperson at that time. And at that time, I think the whole CSR piece was just kind of picking up. And Vodafone Foundation was launched nearly at the same time that I did this project. I was extremely attracted to the whole proposition of what happens beyond business because I had no idea what it was. And I nominated myself for a women empowerment project at that time. And it was more about discovering women on ground to understand what are the hardships they go through, what are the kind of things they have defied to actually live their lives differently and to contribute value to the society. I volunteered as a project lead for that. And I think that was a 1 month project. And that was more like it just added more to it because I had already come from the experience of understanding what it takes to work with different sets of people. And suddenly, I equally realized that here are women who were educated, who were, some of those women were pass outs of IIM, and there were women who were not educated at all, but yet they were driving massive social change. And this was a discovery that I made in various parts of the country, some in Rajasthan, some in Gujarat, in nooks and corners of Haryana. And when I got back, Monisha, I think there was a feeling of nothingness with me. There was a feeling of that what am I doing in my life? Suddenly I realized that 12 and a half years I have worked in a corporate selling connections. How is that adding any meaning or value? So I think because I was already just working in a corporate ecosystem, and the only thing that perhaps the 90s kids were taught was that you have to do your conventional college, you have to do your MBA, and then you have to work in a corporate because that's exactly what is expected of you. And the only thought that I had was that I am getting an earning for myself. I'm standing on my two feet. And women at that time, if you were able to make a living for yourself, that in itself was quite an achievement. And I thought my purpose in life was fairly settled. But I realized after perhaps those two specific and two critical experiences in my life that I was not complete. There was something which was missing in my life. And this was personally my take on life. This does not take away the fact that there are so many more people who need to contribute towards the economy, which is equally important, right? But my only takeaway from all of this was I needed a change. I needed to do something different. And that's exactly what I landed up doing. I quit my job and without even understanding what I would land up doing. I had zero understanding of what an NGO does. The only thought that I had in my mind was that if it is not corporate, it is social sector. So I said, okay, I'm going to join an NGO. The only NGO that I knew of at that time was HelpAge India, Child Rights NU, and yeah, that's about it, because those were the prominent NGOs. Today, the number of NGOs are like booming. But at that time, the prominent NGOs were just these. So I applied for a job at CRY, and let me share with you something very interesting. Before CRY, I had just worked only in two organizations, 2 to 3 organizations, two in advertising and one was Vodafone. And in all of these organizations, Somehow I was lucky or whatever, but my interviews never really had, there was no formal interview as such. Somewhere someone knew me and they inducted me, and it happened very naturally and seamlessly. Okay. And suddenly I was applying for a job in CRAI, and would you believe, Monisha, I went through at least 5 rounds of intense interviews. Okay. Not only that, the feeling that I got was, here is a person who comes with such great experience, and you are actually grilling me in 5 interviews. I'm ready to join you at 40% salary cut, and you are grilling me. You should feel obliged that I'm joining you. But that was the thought process. I think corporates make you really egoistic as people. So I was extremely egoistic, and I was like, okay, so they took those 5 interviews, and I finally managed to sail through, and I joined CRAI as their general manager for fundraising, because perhaps that's the only thing that fit in, because I didn't know anything else. I had not worked in grassroots. I had not done any of that. Actually, those were the two and a half defining years of my life, because suddenly I was out of that four-walled cabin. Suddenly I was out there, understanding what an ASHA worker does, understanding what an Anganwadi is all about, understanding what is the percentage of budget that gets allocated to education and health. And that, I think, truly was the best learning that I could have ever got. It truly gave me a deeper understanding of the disparities that exist in our society, the difference between the haves and the have-nots. Because, it is one thing to read about it, but it's another thing to truly experience it. I think those 2 years, I must have made 3 trips to Kashmir. I must have gone multiple times over to Banaras and various other parts of the country, and things which were truly a stigma, I experienced them up close and personal. Whether it was the areas in Banaras where the first generation of learners were being nurtured, primarily because their mothers were actually working in the space of, they were in the flesh trade, right? So that is the area that I got an exposure to for the first time. Similarly, when I went to Kashmir, I realized the kind of trauma that children were living with. That is also the time when I first understood the percentage of disabled children because of the mine explosions that take place there. And I think that truly gave me a deeper understanding of what are the kind of challenges people are living with. The beauty of it was, Monisha, for me, I feel fairly blessed because everything happened sequentially. Everything happened sequentially in my life. And also, perhaps, as if God had a plan of converging all the paths together to make something happen, right? So that's how, CRAI made a huge impact in my life. And I would consider CRAI was like a learning ground for me, because it really taught me a lot. And then I was blessed with Adya. I have an 8-year-old today, and and she was a late child. So when Adya happened, I was very, very sure that I wanted to give her everything that perhaps I had imagined I would when I would have a baby. And that's exactly what I did. I took a break. CRAI was extremely kind to give me 18 months of work from home, which was unheard of. But I think somewhere I did not take that up. I did not take that offer up. I quit CRAI, and I gave 1.5 years of nurturing time to Adya. But soon I think something started niggling at the back, and I said, okay, I need to get back to work. It never occurred to me that I would start anything of my own at all, ever, because corporate was something which I had forgotten long back, because I had already moved to social sector. I started appearing for interviews within the social sector, but you'll be surprised, Monisha, and something which completely disheartened me was that when I went back to look for a job in the social sector, in spite of the kind of experience I came with, And in spite of having a woman on the other side who was interviewing me, the questions that were being asked of me completely left me so disheartened. They were questions which were around my capacity to bring 100% to work, given the fact that I was a new mother. And I think those were the things which again pushed me to think that what are we doing? I think at the end of the day, we say that women need to nurture women. We say that, okay, the social sector perhaps is a little more understanding. Here I was facing absolutely the contrary.
I think for a woman, right, the biggest disability is to become a mother. At least if you are in that working environment, right? If you are if you're conducting a job or delivering a role in an organization, and should you want to kind of, make a swap of jobs, I think that is the biggest disability that has been identified in a woman. And it is so amazing that we are still stuck with that mindset. Where in the world are we going to think of larger things as an organization, right?
So in 2010, when I started working on the project which engaged persons with vision impairment, we particularly worked with National Association for the Blind in Delhi. And the director there, Shalini Khanna, became a very good friend. So while I was still thinking what I will do, I went back to her and I said, I don't have anything to do. I have enough time. Can I volunteer? And that is when I spent good 7 to 8 months at NAB Hoskas, just volunteering my time. All I was doing was participating in all discussions that were taking place, spending time with the blind girls. I started visiting a lot of hostels in Delhi to understand what exactly takes place there. So on one hand, I realized the potential that these kids had. On the other hand, I equally became absolutely aware of the entitlements that they were also going through. And also, I understood that there was a critical gap that existed when it comes to corporates employing them and what perhaps they could have bridged. And that is exactly what gave me the confidence to start Sarathi. So Sarathi started in 2018. BPO. We started out as a BPO, as a call center, because that's what I knew. I was a hardcore sales and marketing person. So in terms of the skill set I had was that. The only thing is that I decided to only run a BPO with persons with disabilities. For first 1 year, I did not get a paying client because nobody believed that this was possible. Second, almost everybody thought I was running an NGO. Third, I think, and which is quite strange and sometimes fairly poignant, that while I was definitely facing rejection from the corporates that I was approaching, I was equally facing a lot of rejection from the community of persons with disabilities. I will not blame them for it, because somewhere what was happening was that they come from a very insecure environment. They come from a very insecure mindset. And there is a huge amount of question mark on what is in it for you. Why are you doing it? And in my case, Monisha, like in most situations when entrepreneurs or when NGO founders are trying to create something, they are mostly coming from a place of self-experience. They're coming from a place of either being a mother or either being a sibling or a parent or a caregiver and so on and so forth. In my case, I did not have any kind of a direct linkage. And when these questions were coming to me, I used to be at a loss because I didn't have an answer to something like that. And therefore, because the community did not trust me, it took me a long time to generate that trust. It took me a while to establish the fact that this is like any other company. You are required to work for which you will get paid because of the work that we collectively are going to create. The client is going to pay us.
Richa, you were trying to get the so-called, people with disabilities into the mainstream society. That is what you were trying to do. You were trying to build a bridge, right? You were simply trying to build a bridge.
One of the critical gaps that exist in corporates is that there is an absolute lack of empathetic conversation between the customer care executive and the customer, right? Now, I had seen that personally, both at Vodafone as well as at Cry, because at Cry we used to do fundraising calls. At Vodafone we used to do telecom sales. Now, what was happening in both of these situations was youngsters were being employed who perhaps did not even value the kind of job that was being given to them, because they would constantly keep hopping for even a slight incremental jump that they would get. And they were not as invested in what they were doing, right? What I had realized was that when I was with Vodafone and I had done a project with persons with vision impairment, the reason why they were able to do what they were was primarily because they were so committed. Also because there were not very many options available to them. And there was a natural sense of empathy in their voice. They were truly understanding, they were emotionally invested in conversations and so many more things. And for me, that was a business gap that existed, which could naturally get completed through these. I clearly looked at it as a business case.
And you took it as a virtue, right? As a virtue that could add economic value at the end of the day to the business. Imagine if there's no attachment in terms of, when you're selling a product or a service, how in the world are you going to have conversion?
It was just a matter of identifying that this is a possibility. Where is it we can fit in, and how can we make a business case out of it? And Monisha, it took me 1.5 years to finally get the right set of corporates who were willing to take a part with us. Yes, there were pilot projects that were run, but I'm so proud of my team that they didn't let me down. We landed up not only delivering on what the expectations were, but even we crossed it like crazy. And that became a success story because you just needed that first story. And when we got that first story, it just kind of had a spiraling impact. And we started getting a lot of clients. And that's how within 1.5 years of setting up Saarathi, we broke even operationally. And we were profitable. Not only did we start with just about 5 people, and I think by the time we entered pandemic, we were a team of 20. But the beautiful part is, Monisha, and I keep saying that pandemic changed our fortunes. A lot of companies shut shop during pandemic. But the beauty of it is that during the pandemic, we grew 5 times over. From a team size of 20, we grew to a team size of 100. During that time, all of them working from home.
Excellent.
First was empathy. The second thing that worked to our advantage was most corporates may be located in a Mumbai, may be located in a Delhi, but they are catering to customers pan-India, right?
Right.
They need to service them in their language, right? We realized that, okay, we have skilled resources sitting in different parts of the country. Pandemic suddenly opened the gates to the fact that, okay, it was acceptable to work from home. And we immediately reached out to everybody. And we mobilized people in 13 different states who spoke 8 different languages.
Wow.
And we were able to service clients like ITC Foods, Daikin Air Conditioners, Amazon, DS Foods, all these clients who were looking for regional language support, we were able to do it.
Amazing.
And that again became a huge advantage and a selling point for us.
It just starts with one belief, takes a little bit of time for that belief to get accepted, and then there is no looking back. If you have faith in what you're doing, right? Amazing. So is Saarathi still doing the same thing that you were doing in the pandemic, or have you been able to expand further?
So, our team size is the same. However, what we realized was, Monisha, that the clients that we were servicing as, their BPO channel partner, a lot of those clients started getting confidence in the abilities of persons with disabilities, right? They started talking to us about, oh, you are able to do it. Is there a way that you can help us drive inclusion in our organization also? And I think to me, that was extremely encouraging as well as pivotal, because we had not thought it like that. Clearly, my original idea and vision was, if we are able to do it, a lot of people will see if it's possible with us, they will do it themselves. It was as simple in my mind. When I started talking to a lot of corporates, I realized the problem was not as simple as what I had defined it to be. I think somewhere there was a huge amount of hesitation that almost all corporates were going through. Because one, they did not want to make a mistake. Number two, they perhaps had hired people with disabilities and they had burnt their hands and they did not want to go through it again. Third, their biases were just not allowing them to experiment with it as much. Now, I'm sure you are equally aware and you've gone through that phase where from a diversity point of view, only women were considered. अगर आपके corporate ecosystem में women है, you have achieved your diversity agenda. It is rather unfortunate that some corporates still think like that, but that is the way it is. But I'm equally happy that I think in the last couple of years, particularly, the DEI scope has expanded to include LGBTQI and to include persons with disabilities.
Absolutely.
I started talking to corporates. I realized that they were sitting at a huge intent. The challenge was they just did not know how to operationalize it. Also, they only knew that NGOs exist to do this. They did not know that there was possibly someone who comes from a place of experience could also help them navigate their journey. So that is when we started working with corporates through our consulting and advisory model, where we started understanding from them where they are sitting on their inclusion journey, what is it that we hope to achieve, and what are the current gaps that need to be bridged before they start hiring. Now, while we were working on all of this in a very piecemeal manner, we realized that there was just so much response we were getting. The only way to solve this problem was to be able to do it at scale. Now, scale is possible in two manners. One is if you make it digitally available. Second, if you are true believer in collaborations and partnerships. So on one hand, we started developing our inclusion transformation platform, where on this platform we encourage PWDs to register and profile themselves. While we are creating a database, our intention is to also constantly counsel them, upskill them, and then navigate the journey towards the relevant corporate. While they may be sitting as just a dormant database, it is only that we constantly work on activating them in one way or the other, so that they are ready for the kind of job opportunities that exist in the market. Parallelly, we also get corporates to post their jobs on the platform so that PWDs who find themselves ready enough to apply for a job can apply, and then we navigate that entire journey for both PWDs as well as corporates.
And I still have a question, Richa, and this could be because I've been through that process of myself getting inducted into an organization, right? Now, we all come qualified to a certain level, experienced to a certain level, irrespective of people with disabilities or people with, people who are considered normal and able. Now, every individual needs to get inducted into that role, right? Basically, where you have a set of experiences and abilities, and you go through that either a 1 month to 3 month to 6 month induction where you are taught whatever is missing to make you role ready. I understand what you're doing. You have let's say a data of people today, who have registered themselves from different, sections of the society where they come with some disability, be it visible or invisible. And you also have the intent of corporates who are willing to hire them today. Now, is there again a different kind of method of induction for these people, which you which you may be able to help them design, but eventually needs to be a model which needs to exist in every corporate, right? Do you think that bit of induction model designing is also happening? Because imagine if somebody with a with some physical challenge or invisible challenge is inducted along with the rest of people like us, right? Where the pace could be different and it could worry everybody. Again, mismanagement out of the whole thing might arise.
Number one, we don't encourage corporates to hire persons with disabilities till such time they have gone through the basic induction and sensitization. Now, we also follow a very, very stringent protocol on that, because what we have realized is if organizations land up hiring without getting sensitized, or without making sure that the PWD's direct hiring managers or line managers are not aligned, they will always land up in trouble. And I'm very honest about it with all our corporate clients of the BPO space as well as otherwise, that a person with disability may take at least twice more time to reach to that level of competency that perhaps a non-disabled person will.
Absolutely.
However, once the person reaches that level, you will not face any other challenge. Only when these corporates are mentally prepared for it do we proceed. Because there is no point of fighting it. If there is negotiation going to take place on this aspect, we drop it. Because this is not negotiable. You can't lie about it. Just because you want to push it, you can't lie about it. This is a fact. And I am coming from a place of experience, so I can say that, right? Second thing is, a lot of corporates who have never experienced hiring persons with disabilities, we always encourage them to incubate PWDs with us. Now, what incubation essentially means is that these people are hired on our payroll, but they work out of their facility, but they will have a shadow manager from our side.
Excellent.
Along with a mentor from their side. So I'll give you an example. Very recently, we hired a couple of people in the autism spectrum in a large financial services company. Now, within the autism spectrum also, individuals are unique because their challenges are no two individuals within the spectrum can be the same, right? With HR functions of organizations, they are used to SOPs, right? They are used to only follow protocols. Now, with disability inclusion, you have to defy the protocol. If you're not prepared to do that, you will not be able to succeed in it, right?
Exactly.
And that's the reason why what we encourage doing is there has to be a shadow process and there has to be a mentor buddy process. We work with the mentors very closely, not only on the performance part. We don't compromise on performance, and performance indicators are reviewed regularly. However, along with the performance indicators, we also review the behavioral indicators. And that therefore allows us to seamlessly integrate a person in the ecosystem. So that's how we go.
Excellent. And that's the only way. I can't think of a better way to sort of get everybody role ready or opportunity ready or delivery ready, right? Unless that process happens. And, it comes from within their homes. That's how they are brought up. And eventually when they're launching themselves in the outside world to work and employ and create a sustainable life, they require the same extension of support, right? Assuming that in the same workplace, you have people who have, let's say, lack of empathy because they've never been exposed to people with disabilities. They've never worked or lived or had a brush with them. But today there is a situation where they see that there are some people with challenges who are working right amongst them. Is there an exercise, an ongoing exercise between these two genres of, employees where they, create empathy, or there is an exercise of creating empathy in the workplace? We all talk about workplace culture today, right? And somewhere I believe that if this benefit of having people with disabilities in the working environment today, once they've been incubated and placed, brings them in close proximity to people who think they have no other physical challenges and they are not people with disabilities, can this exercise also help to create more empathy in the whole culture itself?
Monisha, when we talk about the business case of disability inclusion, there are certain things which are fairly quantifiable. Clearly, as I say, based on our experience, hiring a person with disability reduces attrition drastically, and it naturally translates into savings on account of training cost, on account of hiring cost in XYZ. But a very, very distinct benefit is the culture transformation. I think the moment you hire persons with disabilities in an organization, it lends itself beautifully to how overall the organization feels more empathetic. we human beings are made beautifully. I feel that human beings are the most creative creation of God, and it is wrong to say that we can't change.
Exactly.
I think we change beautifully. You and I are living examples. You just need those nudges. And the moment those nudges exist in the ecosystem around you, you automatically change.
Absolutely.
Isn't it that when we walk up to a barista and the person across the counter is a person with speech and hearing impairment, our natural inclination is to smile more? Yes. Now, that is who we are. Human beings are they're nice set of people, yeah. We are all nice people. It is just that we need to see more niceness around us.
Right.
And with people with disabilities in the ecosystem, you just happen to see more niceness around us. That's about it.
I think one of the reasons why people change jobs is because of lack of empathy in the system, because of the lack of that niceness and warmth in the system, right, where you feel valued and you feel nurtured, and I think somewhere this whole aspect of inclusion, right, of having people of all backgrounds, be it not just ethnicity, be it not just of gender, be it of abilities, etc., it helps to make that environment rich, make it more accepting towards each other. Like my daughter rightly says, and I don't know from where she's picked these up, but she says, "Mom, we are all able in some ways and not so able in many," right? So,
which is true for everybody.
Exactly. So whoever has this mindset that I am able and this person is disabled, I think this will help to redefine the language as well. And imagine if that starts with workplaces, it starts with educational institutions, it starts with organizations, societies, etc. Eventually, you're making a wonderful society to live in.
I think when we talk about any ecosystem, whether you talk about our homes, or you talk about schools, or you talk about corporates, there are few things that make everything better. Gratitude, appreciation. Now, when you engage with persons with disabilities, you realize that they express so much gratitude for everything around. They are so appreciative of everything around. Now, if there is an exhibition of these things that you are able to experience and see, then you naturally will gravitate more towards doing it yourself, right? And that's exactly what you're talking about as a cultural transformation.
What is your ask from whoever is listening, right? I'm sure we all, the kind of work that we do, we feel the dearth of some support, right? So the last question that I leave my guests with is that please ask for the support that you need. Or what is it that will help you to do what you're doing far better?
Today, we are looking at creating an impact at scale. And that is only possible through collaborations and partnerships. I would be very open to talking to people who are working in their little capacity or a larger capacity in this space in some way or the other, because it is the collective effort together that is going to make an impact. Because even when we talk to corporates, at the end of the day, you just don't know what they are looking for, and we don't know how we can collaborate and fulfill their needs.
So on your mission to have more and more people with physical or invisible disabilities employed, create sustainable livelihoods for them, I think the urge here, the request here is that let us all come together and help sensitize, organizations that we are working for, that there is a large resource group available, who can contribute to not just delivering roles in these organizations, but actually delivering sort of contributing to the economy of the country, right? I think in lesser words, that's what we're talking about, that this section is capable of contributing to the economy of the nation. Okay, they cannot be sidelined. They have abilities. They help create better environments.
We cannot ignore them because 15% of the population are persons with disabilities. Think about it. With this 15%, the caregivers included, you are actually talking about a huge chunk, nothing less than 25 to 30%. Absolutely. And if that be the case, you cannot not talk to them. You cannot not include them, whether it is the society, whether it is educational institutes, or for that matter, even corporates.
Let's educate, let's include, let's employ, and let's make a better society, right? That's the way forward for all of us. And that's the only way that we grow together as a nation, right? There's no point in leaving people behind and say that, we are developing and we will be developed someday. So thank you so much, Richa. I had a blast talking to you because you spoke every word that means the world to me. And it just encourages me as a caregiver who's raising a child with disability, that there are people like you because of whom the world is going to be slightly more accepting when they are out there ready, looking for an opportunity to serve an organization or have a career, etc. Just like how we have. So thank you so much, Richa. Stay blessed.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for having me. And I loved this conversation. It was such a candid conversation. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.